What do we know about this story? Rape. Okay. What else? Injustice. What else? Incest. Yes. Sorry? Impunity. Who are the people involved? Tamar, Amnon, who else? Shahonadab, who else? There are all the people who work in the home. Huh? They're also there. And though they are not speakers in this passage, they are observers. And clearly, they know what's going on. Clearly. You know, when first you say to all the people who are working in the house, leave my room and send in my sister, and she leaves crying, tearing her clothes, and you say, now lock the door behind her, they know what's going on, right? They know. So there are many characters in this story, many people who are involved. Some are passive, some are active. But there's a lot going on in this story. So I want to ask you, when last did you hear this passage read in your church? Yes? Never. Never. So you haven't heard a sermon on this passage? Why do you think that is? Because it speaks about all the things we don't want to talk about. So, there's a very real sense that even though we can find these topics in our sacred texts, we censor our sacred texts. So when people say, no, we can't talk about that because it's not in the Bible, no. It's in the Bible, we don't want to talk about it. And in many senses, we are like the people who work in the house. We see what's going on, but we don't want to engage. So let's just talk a little bit about what's going on in this story. Tamar clearly has been taken into the house of her brother, where against her will, he forced her and raped her, right? Is Tamar passive about that? Tell me what happens in the story. What does Amnon say to her? She told her brother that it was wrong, yes. Does he tell her to keep silent? No. But she's in a society that doesn't allow women a voice in this instance. My question to you is she silent? I don't think she is. I don't think she is. Tamar is very active because she does what she can do in her society to tell people that she has been violated. She takes her clothing, she rips it, she puts ash on her head. Clearly, she is giving the message, I have been violated. And it's because she is active in doing that, that her brother Absalom can say to her, has Amnon been with you? Has Amnon been with you? What's the role of King David in this story? You need to speak up because I'm an old deaf man. Yeah, King David has the power, right? Does he? What does he do? He gets angry, he gets sad, he does nothing. Does that sound familiar as a response to sexual and gender-based violence? You get angry, you get sad, you do nothing. One-third of all women in this society have experienced sexual and gender-based violence. One-third. So when we look in this room, you can assume one-third of the women in this room have experienced sexual and gender-based violence. When you look in your home and you see your mother and you see your sisters and you see your aunties and you see your grandmother, one-third at least will have experienced sexual and gender-based violence. But sexual and gender-based violence doesn't stop there, because it is also very prevalent and completely underreported amongst the gay and lesbian community. So sexual and gender-based violence is common in that community as well, but is totally silent because there's not even supposed to be sex happening. So we don't talk about sexual and gender-based violence. But our silence becomes complicity, because our inability to talk about these things creates the environment in which they can continue to happen. Here's the more uncomfortable fact. It's difficult enough to hear that one-third of all women and many people who are in same-gender relationships experience sexual and gender-based violence. The more difficult thing is to know that 90% of all those violations have happened by someone in the family, or someone who the family has invited into the home. So it's either a relative, or a friend of the family. 90%. So when we're talking about rape and violence, it doesn't happen on the street. It happens in the places in which we should feel safest. That's where it happens. And that in and of itself creates vulnerabilities for not only the reality of the integrity of our bodies being violated, but also creates vulnerabilities around sexually transmitted infections, creates vulnerabilities around access to health care, because if you can't talk about these things, you can't do anything about it.